Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson. Before I get to our guest here today, I'd like to remind everyone that if you enjoy this content, to please give a like and subscribe down below. We'd greatly appreciate it. We have Katlynne Joerg on the podcast with us. She's a bikini competitor coming to us all the way from Austin, Texas. And most importantly, she's our current guest. Katlynne, thank you so much for being on the show.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So now, before I ask you about, what inspired you to make that healthy and fit lifestyle change, I got to ask, what is the weather like down there in Texas?
It's beautiful. It's like 60 degrees right now. It's sunny, but it's not too hot and it's just perfect weather. So I love Austin.
Oh my God. It's already making me feel bad just because, oh God, I mean, being up here in Minnesota, it's 5 degrees. Oh God, that's just, yeah, that sounds so appealing. But now, I depress everyone on the podcast. So it's gotten better with Instagram the last 5 years, but there's still just so many women that believe if they touch one weight, they're just going to hulk out, turn into Dwayne The Rock Johnson overnight. Did you ever have that fear? And even if you didn't, I mean, there's probably so many times that you've heard that from other women. What is your main response whenever people come up and say that?
Yeah, I wish it was that easy to put on muscle. That would be wonderful. I think it's the education, like you said, with Instagram, it's getting a lot better. But it's a process, man, to do that. Especially being in your off season, trying to make improvements. I don't think I had that mentality just because I looked at Ashley Horner, she has a lot of muscle, but she's not, hulked out by any means. So, I said to myself, if she's doing this program, then that's how she got there. So I'm not happy with my current body. I'm like skinnier, but I'm like soft and I'm not a fan of it. So I got to change what I'm doing if that's what I want to be. So I just, took in all the information I could about training and nutrition and really just started researching the whole thing. So I think with that, I was able to kind of educate myself along the way, but definitely, growing up when I was younger, kind of had that idea in your head, but knew where I wanted to be and just kind of researched how to get there, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many times where I always say, like if I had a nickel for every time I heard that, it always brings me back to the story of when I was in college, getting bigger and stronger. One of the things, I mean, I had a really good friend who would always say to me, like, Ryan, I want to, go to the gym and get more healthy. I'm afraid I'm going to get too big. And then it finally got to a point where I just said, look, the amount of weight that you carry in your purse when we go out to the club or when we go out to parties weighs more than a lot of the dumbbells in the gym. And you are not getting an ounce of muscle from lugging that thing around 24/7.
You're
So
just
that,
getting a shoulder imbalance.
yeah, well, absolutely. And I always told her, I mean, it's like, what is the worst thing that's going to happen? You're going to get healthier, and that's just, and also one of the things that isn't talked about as much that really should be is confidence. Just your confidence boost that it gets. It makes you feel so much better about yourself. How did that impact other aspects of your life? Just the added confidence boost that you get from working out, because it doesn't just affect yourself in the gym feeling more confident. It affects your everyday life. What was your story with that?
Honestly, when I say it changed my life, that's not even being an ounce of, dramatic. It absolutely did. So, I'm also a type 1 diabetic. I've been type 1 since I was 5. I was diagnosed with double pneumonia and I was hospitalized, and a lot of things happened from there. So with that, it overhauled not just how I looked, but how I was able to, manage my condition, how I felt, how I walked, how I interacted with people. My relationships got better. It sounds so almost ridiculous, but it's true. When you put in that work and you put in that dedication, you teach yourself so much about who you are as a person, and it radiates to every aspect of your life. So it's truly amazing, kind of the domino effect that it has.
Yeah, I mean, I also love to make the statement, if you were to walk into a gym with 100 people, there are 100 different ways as to how those people got into shape, whether it comes down to their diet, their nutrition, how many reps they do, what exercises they do. There's so many little things that then add up to the package that we end up seeing. Was that difficult for you at first, sort of realizing what worked best for your body? Because I always love to say, if you were to walk up to someone and say, hey, this body part of yours looks amazing. What did you do specifically to get it to look like that? What works best for them 99% of the time isn't going to work as good for you.
So I started with like a pure, if it fit your macros approach. And through trial and error with that, I'm like, I don't know if this is the most optimal. I mean, all these people are trying to fit like Pop Tarts and all of these junky things in their diet, like it's not really fueling their performance. And then from there kind of evolved into, well, there's this happy medium of flexible dieting. So a lot of people think that IFYM and flexible dieting are the same thing. They're absolutely not. So flexible dieting is basically you have like a meal plan for yourself. But instead of the same 10 foods over and over and over, maybe if you're not feeling chicken, you can swap that out for like 99% turkey. Or, if you're not feeling like tilapia, you can sub it out for chicken or what have you. So it's making those smart choices, but it's also something that's super sustainable for me. So I always say to people, as I'm talking to them, you have to enjoy what you do, and you have to enjoy the nutrition aspect, because if you don't, it's just not going to stick and you're going to be miserable. So it's kind of a process to figure out what works for you.
Well, absolutely. And I always like to compare it sort of to, like a mad scientist, making a concoction.
Yeah.
It's a lot of trial and error. It's a lot of, seeing what works well with other things. I mean, yeah, that's one thing that I could use to describe it. That would be 100%. But now, at what point in your journey did you decide that you want to do a bodybuilding show? How long into working out before you said, hey, this is something that I think would be really cool and that I should do?
Oh yeah. So I started competing in 2016. Honestly, so in 2015, I was still kind of doing my own thing. So it had been, a couple of years at that point, and I was just at the point where, I feel like I've researched as much as I can. Like I've, found all these like downloadable programs, purchase programs, really made some solid progression. But I want to take it to the next level. I love this, and I want to invest in myself and invest in kind of the next step, just in terms of training. Wasn't even thinking about competitions at that point. So at that point, I hired a coach, and I just said, I really want to focus on some strength goals at that point. So I started doing a DUP program, which is basically just a strength progression program, focusing on your main three lifts, so bench, deadlift, squat. Kind of like preparing for maybe like a power lift type of situation, but I had no intentions of competing. So it was really just personal strength goals at that point. So I worked with a coach, and after, making a lot of solid progress in that respect, she looked at me one day and she's like, have you ever thought about competing? Like, you're really, you're kind of type A, to be honest. And she's like, that's a good quality to have if you're going to be a competitor and be in the bodybuilding world. She's like, you don't want to compete in powerlifting, but you love your training and you really want to take it to the next level. And honestly, I just kind of thought about it. I'm like, it's something that I've had in the back of my head, but I always thought, oh, I'll never be able to do that. I can never, get my body there. And, that's just for other people, not for me. And it took her sitting down with me and saying that to say, you know what, like, let's just go for it. So that day I decided to jump into my first prep, which I think was like a 24-week prep. It was really long, yeah, all my preps are pretty long. I'm not like the most genetically gifted person in terms of my metabolism and, losing body fat. So it takes a little bit longer. So I build in some time for some plateaus.
So yeah, it's definitely one of those things that a lot of people don't realize. But now a question that I love to ask, all of my guests, whether they be, athletes, health and fitness competitors, musicians, professors. For my musicians, I always like to ask, what is that thrill like performing on stage for you? What is it like performing in front of all those groups of people? But also for my health and fitness guest, that also applies to, what is that feeling like for you when you get to step on stage and, like we said, show off all of that hard work that you've been working months upon months for? What is that like for you?
It's amazing. It's the most crazy adrenaline rush, just being up there and showing off all the hard work. All the hard work is done at that point. So at that point, it's just your time to shine and have fun. It's amazing. I can't describe anything like it. It just, that's what drives you. And subsequent preps after the first one, that's what you think about. You think about that feeling. You think about the endorphins and everything else, and that's what keeps you going. So there's two camps of people. There's people that do shows and just like, oh no, I didn't really like it, it wasn't for me. And then there's the people that absolutely fall in love with it and just crave that feeling, and I'm definitely one of those people.
Yeah, and it's all about, finding stuff that you love in life, because I always like to say, if you find something like that that really just makes you feel so alive, follow it and stay with it, because I mean, it's all about, just finding that aspect in life. But one of the things that I love to talk about, because it's not talked about really at all, especially on Instagram, is, a lot of people don't realize that when you guys are at your stage ready, you guys have sort of manipulated your body through all the dieting and through all of the working out into a look that is not sustainable. Like, I've had friends that have come up to me who listen to this and say, like, one of the biggest shocks for me is for all these guy and girl bodybuilders that I have on, is that they aren't able to, keep that weight. I always thought they just looked that way all the time. It's one of those things that a lot of first time competitors too really struggle with, because they don't realize, all of that hard work that you put in at the gym for your prep, you are going to have to put on weight though, unfortunately. Realizing that, was that a struggle for you at first, and has that sort of evolved for you where you found better ways to maintain that without, going crazy?
Yeah, no, it's definitely hard. I think especially for females, for guys there's a perception of like, oh, if the scale's going up, that's awesome. So but a little bit different for women, seeing the scale go up, your body changing, some of the lines fading, those types of things. It's really hard. You do put in so much work for it, and logically that that look is not sustainable. You know that everything's been manipulated for that one day. And, a lot of people say you can only look like a competitor for 24 to 48 hours. And that's all you should, honestly. Like you need to let everything come back, your hormones come back, your all of it just come back to like a stable point, for your body. And it's really hard because logically you know it, but then there's like that emotional piece of you that
Yep.
just is watching it fade, and it's so hard. I think over time it gets easier. There's definitely days where I still struggle with it. I haven't competed in a little while. I've had a long off season just to make those improvements, let my body get back to normal. My last season I did a lot of shows in a row. I did like 7 in a very short amount of time. So right now, just trying to let my body get back to where it needs to be, to healthy functioning, really make sure I'm in an optimal place before I do a prep again. But some days are easier than others. Like to make those improvements. It's cool to see the strength gains go up, to start to push more weight in the gym. But you kind of look at back at things and you're like, man, I miss the shreds and I miss that feeling. So it's tough, but just keeping that goal in mind and knowing that you are taking an off season, you are taking that improvement season to make those changes, and just keeping that end goal in mind, I think is really important to just keep that, clear. But a lot of
Yeah.
people think that you stay like that forever, and that's just not reality. So
I mean, that's almost up there with our myth that, you're going to gain 50 pounds if you start working out. That's where people just believe that too as much.
yeah.
And also the bodybuilding thing. So, I mean, yeah, they're both mutually just right up there with the most common things that we hear. So yeah, that's one of the things that I love to talk about because like you said, it's not talked about enough on Instagram and not too many people talk about it. But what is your go-to post-show meal now?
Post show meal. I think I always, your cravings kind of change throughout prep, and I think it's so interesting. Like there'll be that one thing that sticks out in your head, whether it's like, I want an Oreo, I want like a Reese's cup. There's one thing that you just like you dream about, right? But I think my post show pretty much always go to meal is some kind of a burger. So I always go to like the savory side. I want one of those gourmet burgers with like an egg on the top, like really high quality, beef and the egg and cheese and everything else, and like sweet potato fries is like my favorite. And then some kind of dessert, whether it's ice cream or brownies or something sweet. I need that like savory and sweet side of things.
God, you're making me drool just talking about this. That's why it's my least favorite question to ask because I get so hungry just think about. I mean, if I ever competed, I would do a Five Guys, just right after and just chow down, yeah, on how many burgers I can. I mean, I don't know how many I'd be able to get, but it would be at least more than one or two. So yeah, I mean, that would be my dream. But now, I always love to ask these two questions to all of our guests that we've had on that are health and fitness related. So the first one for me, I realized, when I was getting bigger and stronger in college, there's so many positive things. But the one negative thing for me is that you're going to get asked to move a lot of people's furniture. You're going to get asked to open a lot of pickle jars. I mean, I'm still at home with my parents for the next couple of months before I move out. And every time, they come home with groceries, I basically have to pick up the car and lift it into the driveway. Have you found that to be a similar experience where people just take one look at you and then they just say, like, oh, yeah, she definitely works out. And then they just assume that you can do favors like that for them?
Yeah, I've definitely ran into a little bit. It's funny the moving furniture side. Like I'm 5'2", like I'm pretty small. My wingspan is not so big, so I'm like, while I might be strong, like I'm not efficient. Like
Yeah.
I can't pick up things because my arms aren't long enough to reach the side. So, um, you know, I might be strong, but it doesn't always help. So.
You got the luck. That's one of the benefits, then I guess, of being on the shorter side is that you don't have to deal with that because literally, like every other weekend during the summer, it would be a different friend, hitting me up and saying, like, "Hey, Ryan, can you come and help me move this furniture?" It just got to a point where I said, "Yeah," but it was, I even told him, I said, as long as I get my workout in before then we'll be fine. So yeah,
You
because I
should
don't want to.
just make them bring you Five Guys. Say, as long as I get my workout in, as long as you bring me Five Guys,
It
then
got to a point though where I would have been morbidly obese if how many times I got asked to move people's furniture though if I had 5 guys. I mean, I know I put on my 10 to 15 pounds of winter weight that I put on every year just because when you're in 5 degrees or as low as it gets to like -20, then honestly,
Yeah.
you cannot be lean because you will not love it at all. So yeah, I had to do that. But now going on to probably my favorite question to ask, and again, this is a multi-million-dollar idea for anyone out there listening. But when it comes to clothes for fit women, I always love to say, you know, shoulders are not your best friend when it comes to dresses. It's gonna be a very, trying process to get them on. Jeans are another thing that we hear of all the time that women with muscles really, really struggle to put on. What are some ways that you've found that sort of compensate for the fact that your clothing options can be limited?
Oh yeah, it's so hard. Shoulders and lats are the worst thing. And
Hmm.
then you also get like trapped in dresses when you try them on. You have that
Hmm.
panic moment wondering if you're ever going to be able to get out of it.
Hmm.
But yeah, clothes are not made for fit people and it's a really tough. I just took a new job recently and I was looking for dress pants and it was probably the worst experience of my life. Um, it's easy when you're in the depths of prep because you're such a little nugget and little string bean that
Hmm.
pretty much anything looks good. But in your off season, it's definitely a struggle. I'd say the stretchier it is, the better time you're gonna have because trying to find something that's not stretching in terms of like pants, trying to find it that's gonna fit your quads, your glutes, and your waist is never gonna happen. So if you can find something with a little bit of stretch, that usually helps. And the same thing with shirts, like things that are like more like that blouse material or like not have no stretch, you're not going to have a good time. So I would say if you can find something with a little bit of stretch, you're probably going to be a lot happier, but it's
I mean,
tough.
I always say to everyone, absolutely, if they come up with an idea for a fit clothing brand or whatever, I mean, it's a multi-million-dollar idea, so definitely get
Yeah.
on it. But now, I mean, I like to ask the guests on our show that are from different climates than mine. So you're from a lot warmer of a climate than I am up here. So during the summer, I mean, especially in Texas where it can get, like 110 degrees, it can get super hot and it can get a little humid. How are you still able to find that motivation to work out? Because I mean, I ask all of our guests that live in the cold climates, the same thing except in the winter. But during the summer, do you ever have any difficulty at all finding that time or finding the right amount, to be outside if it's that hot to still be able to get the workout in? Where does your motivation come from on those days then?
Yeah, so I moved to Texas over the summer. So prior to that, I know your struggle. I was from Buffalo, New York, where
Oh, yep, a lot of
it's
snow, a lot of
yeah,
snow.
so very similar to Minnesota.
Hmm.
So it was definitely harder to find that motivation when it was cold. You had a million layers on, and even to try to warm up to start your lift, you were like trying to do some cardio, trying to like do some like jumps, get some blood flowing. So that was a lot harder. When it's really hot and you get sticky, it's not always fun, but it's definitely better than being cold. So I'll take that any day.
Yeah, and for anyone out there who's international guests or whatever, Buffalo, New York is basically the snow capital. They get more snow than any other place on in the country, just because I mean they're right off a lake, and it's all the or in the ocean too. They get that weather effect where I mean they get a crap load of snow every year. By far. So, I mean, going from those climates too, how did your workouts change at all? Because during the winter, I mean, you can probably do a little bit more, different types of workouts than you would do during the summer. Did that change at all your training routine?
Not really. I mean, I don't train outside,
Hmm.
so that's kind of nice that it's like climate controlled no matter what. I
Hmm.
don't think it changed too much. I think, the only thing is when it was cold, I would do, like 10-15 minutes of like just walking or like on the
Hmm.
elliptical just to try to get like some blood flow happening. So it doesn't require as much out of a warm up there. So that's kind of nice, but that's probably the only difference, really.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times we have other people too that are just like, you got to go in the sauna when it's cold out, just warm up sometimes, or you got to do all that. So it is different techniques that you use. But how have your friends and family reacted since you started on this healthy and fit lifestyle? What has been their main reaction?
Yeah, so when I started, I'm pretty sure they just thought I had all lost my mind. My family was just like, "What are you doing? Like, what is this?" Like, my family is always like based on, get-togethers around food too.
Hmm.
So like, food was like that central thing within the family. So it was kind of tough. They're always supportive of everything that I do. So they weren't, they were really, happy for me that I found something that I loved. And especially the WBFF, my mom, always had this idea that I'd be like a pageant girl. My sister was in pageants. My mom had the same idea for me. So when she found out that there was like a dress and there was like feathers involved and everything, she was all about it. She was so excited. She's actually, she's actually works with like bridal gowns and whatnot. So she designed like my theme wear and all of that. So she got like really involved and she was really supportive. Um, but on the flip side, as I got leaner and got closer to show, I do think they got, pretty concerned. They watch your energy levels drop. They watch, how little food you're eating. You just like slow down too a little bit. Like your body tries to conserve that energy, even just like normal fidgeting that you do or like talking with your hands. Like you just stop to do that like late in prep. So I think they got a little nervous. But watching me, after that, just continue on and continue to compete, they're super supportive. They understand why I do it. They understand why I love it. My mom and dad will be the first ones, at my show cheering me on. So it's great to have such a great support system. And then my fiance also competes. So him and I are, we're training buddies, we support each other through preps and we just get it. So it's nice to have kind of that backing too.
That's awesome. So, I mean, I always love to ask all of our guests that we have on that, like either engaged, married, in a relationship or whatnot. So I always like to ask these three questions. So for our first question, how did you and your fiance meet?
We met at the gym. So
Should have known.
pretty cliche. When I say like love it for a squat. Actually, the reason why I kind of like took interest in him is like watching the fact that he did legs and like how hard he went, and I was like, wow, like that requires some dedication. So, just kind of watching him, and then we became friends, and he was prepping at the time, and we just got to know each other through that, and it was just there as a support system, like purely as a friend, like, hey, if you need anything, like here's kind of what to expect. He was going through like his first prep, so just got close there, and the rest is history. But
That's
he
awesome.
actually proposed at the gym as well. He was doing we were doing a photo shoot after his show. So we always do photo shoots. I mean, you're in the best shape of your life, so you're going to, right? So he set one up and thought nothing of it just because that's what we typically do. So, but good for him. He was smart. He's like, oh, well, I want you in some of the photos. So I made sure my hair was done and makeup was done and all that stuff. But I truly had no idea. But it was perfect. He had a photographer there. Like it's where, we met at the gym and, spent a lot of time there. So it was just perfect. But yeah, we're pretty a little cliche, but it's
Yeah.
okay. I love it.
Well, I mean, you answered my other two questions just with the answer because I was going to ask, where'd you guys go when where'd you meet, and then I was going to ask, how was the proposal story? So I mean, you answered those right off the bat. But what is that like? Have you guys ever been on prep at the same time?
We haven't yet, actually. So we're planning on doing a prep probably not this year, but like starting to prep like early 2020. I think is kind of our goals. Just we have a lot going on. We're getting married this year, buying a house, all of that stuff. So we got a lot going on. But we're probably gonna be prepping at the same time, and I think it'll be okay, just because we're pretty much like the same in terms of personality, so I think we'll be all right. I know people either do really well or really just not well when they try to prep at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
It might get a little interesting because, like I said, in the depths of prep you kind of lose your mind a little bit too. You start wandering around the grocery store, you get lured in by like the rotisserie chicken and you just are standing there, so we might get a little lost at times. We usually keep each other in check, but we're pretty excited about it.
I mean, yeah, because I always say that because I mean, all of our guests who, as couples, they try to prep together. It is like 50-50, like you said, I mean, half
Yeah,
the time, it goes all right. And then the other time, it's just a disaster because, like I said, or like you were alluding to, when you go on prep, you get prep brain and you can do some crazy, stupid
yeah,
stuff. And if you have both of them doing the same thing, I mean, who's going to be the voice of reason in that? So
yeah.
that's why it can be tricky. But now, I mean, I love to talk about the nutrition that is required to look the way that you look when you're on stage, because a lot of people, they don't realize that the nutrition is so, so important for, it's like 90%. They just
Oh,
think
yeah.
if they work out, they'll just get the looks. And I mean, if you work out, yeah, you can lose some weight and, do all that stuff, but the nutrition is so important. What was the biggest change that you had to make nutrition wise when you jump from, your normal average lifestyle to now this lifestyle?
Yeah. So, I think the biggest thing is weighing out your food and being so precise, especially when you get into prep. When you're talking about, say, like just peanut butter, for example, if you were to weigh out 2 tablespoons of peanut butter, that is the most like eye opening experience of your life, right? Rather than using even like a tablespoon, like measuring, a measuring spoon. So I think that's the most important thing, especially when it comes to prep, just being so precise. Every gram matters, especially when you're talking about more nutrient dense food like fats and those types of things. Even I've heard stories of people who, as they got closer to prep, they started to slow in terms of their progress. Couldn't figure out why they were stalling in terms of fat loss. Turns out, they were starting to like chew more and more gum, and even those carbs, like the few carbs that is in sugar free gum, can make a big difference. So I think that's the biggest thing in terms of, bodybuilding and competitions, because it all does add up at the end of the day. So just being so precise with those things is huge.
How do you deal with that mentally? Because, like I said, if you're chewing gum and then you realize that that might be the difference between winning a show and getting second place, I mean, I would go crazy just thinking about everything that I like, how much it is, like how much exactly is it? Like, I don't want to get it off by like 1 gram or
Yeah.
even 1 calorie. Are there any things that you do during prep to sort of de-stress yourself so that you
Yeah.
aren't constantly thinking about that and so that you aren't driving yourself crazy?
Yeah, so I typically use like a macro based approach. So with that, what I'll do is pretty much when it gets closer into prep, I'll be eating the same things pretty much every day. I'll log it in like my fitness pal the night before, kind of Tetris around some macros to make sure that I'm hitting the goals that I need to hit, and then prepping all my food for the next day. So with those things, just really making sure it's down to the gram, making sure you're weighing out all of your food. There's no guesswork. There's no extra additives, and just being super precise and making sure it's buttoned up. In prep, I don't eat out, at pretty much at all, unless I have like a refeed, or like my coach gives me a cheat meal or something if I'm depleted. Beyond that, I want to make sure I have control over my food. And honestly, too, when you get to that point, you can often make your food better tasting than you can at a restaurant. You don't know if they're going to add extra things. And even if they don't, then you're down to like a plain chicken breast. Whereas if you're making it at home, you can use some different spices, that don't have calories in it or whatnot, and you can make it taste a little better. So during prep, I just don't eat out. And it's nice too, because we both compete. So my fiance understands that too. So no one's like, oh, I just want to go out to dinner. So we get it. So it's kind of nice, but
Yeah, I mean, it's always nice. That's another benefit too of, having a spouse or a fiance, just being there for you. Because if you do it on your own, I mean, I always say, good luck to you, and all absolutely also, I mean, I could say get a coach as well. I mean, that's one of the best things you
oh,
can do. I mean, we did have one person who came on and did their first show without a coach and got their pro card, and I was like, okay, that's just the luckiest thing I've ever heard of in my
yeah.
entire life. So yeah, I mean, they're just one of those genetically blessed people then, I guess. But one of the things that, I mean, I forgot to bring up when we were talking about your show that I love to discuss with everyone, because the biggest surprise for me overall was that for a lot of these competitors, posing is the hardest thing to do for them. It's harder than their working out. It's harder than their nutrition. I mean, it's one of those things that the general public would never guess, I don't think, would be the most challenging thing for these competitors. Because, and I always like to make the comparison, I mean, you can be a great driver, you can never be a perfect driver. You can be a great poser, you can never be a perfect poser. What was
Yeah.
that experience like for you getting started with posing, and how has that evolved over time? Because like I always like to say, you always need to be practicing your posing. You can never take any time
Yeah.
off. It's always something that you need to constantly be working on. What has your experience with posing been like so far?
Yeah, so for my first show, that was by far the most frustrating piece of it, just because it's so tough, and I didn't grow up dancing or anything like that, so I didn't really have like that background that can help a lot of people, especially like in bikini. But it's tough, and when it comes to your training and your nutrition, you can be on 100%. You know what I mean? You can get your cardio done 100%. You eat exactly what you're supposed to eat, but that posing is such like a subjective side of things. And it's evolved since then. So I spent a lot of time, I hired a posing coach, really invested that time. I made sure when I did my cardio in the morning for prep, I started like right when I started prep, I started working on my posing too. I would do my cardio in the morning, my fasted cardio, and I block out a half an hour in the morning to work on posing. And then I would also, when I went back to train at night, I would work on posing after I trained. So I would hit it kind of twice a day and really just take videos of myself, like dissect it, watch it, understand what I needed to improve on, and just go there. And honestly, investing that time is just what you need to do. You can never start posing too early if you decide to do a show. I still work on it, off season all the time. It's a constant thing to just keep refining and working on that. But posing coaches are huge too. I always tell people who are starting to compete, it's such a good investment. You invest, in your coach. Your nutrition and training coach is huge as well, but so is a posing coach, and don't neglect that. And I love posing now. I've invested so much time and years into it. So I work with, some posing clients myself, and I love that aspect of it. It's really fun to work with.
I mean, that brings me up to, I mean, I always say, you know, it's just so hard to deal with, and it's so hard to internalize that, you could be the best looking person on the planet, and if you have bad posing, it doesn't matter. You're still gonna
Yeah.
not win some things. So yeah, it's just one of those things there. And we've had so many horror stories of like people, talking about like, yeah, I got my first posing lesson like 2 weeks out from my first show, and I was like, oh yeah, that probably didn't turn out so well. Then you're probably not gonna do so good. So yeah,
Especially when talking about, some of the other divisions, like bikini is a little bit easier in terms of the posing. The front and back is really all you need. But when you're talking about, like bodybuilding, their poses, there's so many and they're so specific,
Mhm.
and everyone has a little bit different body type. So to be able to adjust to highlight your body well, it's something that you really need to invest that time in.
I mean, I couldn't agree more with that too. But I mean, one of the hard things too that a lot of people don't realize is that you guys have to wear those heels. Was your experience like with the heels? Because I mean, a lot of people, whether they wear them ahead of time or not. So the people that wear them ahead of time, don't have as much of a problem. But have heels
Yeah.
always been something that you were really wearing a lot, or was it something that you really sort of had to figure out how to do your whole posing with heels on?
Yeah, so I've always worked like corporate roles,
Mhm.
out of college, so I always had heels on for that. So I wasn't a stranger to heels. So it wasn't like, Bambi walking for the first time kind
Mhm.
of thing by any means, but it does make a big difference. It's so hard to hold those poses and do that routine in heels too. So that's my other piece of advice for people, who decide to do shows, girls in like bikini and figure, buy your
Mhm.
heels like immediately, have a practice pair of heels as well as your show heels, and start wearing them around. I don't care if it's around the house, as you practice your posing and everything else. Just get used to them, and if you're little, maybe get ones that have, a strap on them for a little extra. If you're familiar with heels, maybe you don't have to do that. But it's tough. Your balance and your stability is all off in terms of like as you're turning your hips, or what you're doing, and it's not easy.
And I always said, like if you're good at Instagram, you might do pretty well in bodybuilding, just because, like you said, it's all about hitting those angles and getting the right flavors done, or no, not the right flavors. I should say getting the right pose done. Sorry, I got a little prep in myself, even though I'm not on prep. I always like to say that whenever I get a little tongue tied and twisted. But now we go to our audience favorite and my personal, I should say, favorite part of the podcast, a little questionnaire that we're gonna ask Katlynne here, about a dozen or so questions that we ask all of our health and fitness guests, and we're gonna see how her answers stack up to everyone else that we've had on the show. So for our first question, what is your go-to workout song at the moment?
Oh, good question. I always switch it up. I'm usually kind of that like Papa Roach fan. I always laugh because my fiance is like listening to some like pop, like Taylor Swift or whatever, and then I'm over here with like the heavy metal and like the ridiculousness. But anything of that genre, I love. It's my go-to.
I mean, I always say, I gotta have my cheesy '80s music, just the classic cheese, just to get my workout in. I mean, I got the Rocky Four soundtrack is just so cheesy that I love it. But I have a problem. So like, I work out at the gym. I'm lucky that I have a gym at my house. So 75% of the time, when I work out at home. But when I do go to a normal gym, I'm one of those guys where I gotta wait for the beat to drop when I'm working out. So like, I'll be doing like a lat pull down, and I'll be like here
Oh yeah,
sometimes for like 30 seconds. I've had
you're
people
just
come up to me.
waiting.
Yeah, I've had people come up to me and just be like, "Hey, are you all right? Did you like pull out your back or something like that?" And I'm like, "Nope, I'm just waiting for the beat to
I'm
drop."
just
So yeah,
waiting.
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I'm known throughout my gym as the guy that waits for the beat to drop. But I always say, like, hey, I'm fine with that, because as long as you get a good beat drop, I mean, it really does help out with your workout. I mean, there've been
Yeah.
studies
Oh
that
yeah.
prove that with like your
My
motivation. So yeah,
For my
no,
heavy compound lifts, I do the same thing. I am known to like before I start my set, change the song, scroll to the part where I feel I can get it and then go for it. I need that music to like amp you up and get you a little bit angry. And
mhm,
I always say that I take my training super seriously, and maybe it's because I started with like that more powerlifting style programming. But I train really hard, and I lift heavy, and I'm not that like booty band kind of girl in the gym, so I need my music to get me fired up for sure.
100%. I mean, yeah, I've always wanted to just sort of like edit all of my music so that it like only has the beat drop moments just for when I
Yeah.
work out and make a mix out of it. So who knows? If I get on it, I will definitely let people know. But now, out of all the celebrities on the planet, if you could work out with any celebrity, who would it be?
Ooh, also a good question. All the celebrities. Probably The Rock. Maybe that's cliche, but who doesn't love The Rock?
It,
Honestly.
it, it is 90% of our answer for that question. You're gonna be like a 100th health and fitness guest, so yeah, it is cliche. But I was gonna maybe say like other than Dwayne the Rock Johnson, but then I was like, you gotta include him on the list just because it
Yeah.
is Dwayne the Rock Johnson, and yeah, that would be great to work out with him. Me personally, I mean, like I'm more of an Arnold, where if I worked out with him, that'd be cool, and just to hear him yell at me in his thick Austrian accent, I think would be pretty
Yeah,
funny for me at
right.
least. So yeah, that would definitely be a great experience. But now, out of all the celebrities on the planet, if you could train any celebrity, who would it be?
I could train any. Oh, that's an interesting question. Hmm. Maybe, just like one of the, smaller framed girls, like maybe
Mhm,
like an Emma Stone or something like that, and just
mhm,
kind of like show her the ways of heavy lifting. Maybe
mhm.
something like that. Because I think it's cool when women can kind of take that and be like, wow, I kind of like this and run with it.
Yeah, I mean, I always say one of my biggest pet peeves with the whole, health and fitness industry is that you get all these sometimes these videos of these celebs that are just, curling 2 or 3 pound weights and just being like, oh my God, getting
Yeah.
ready for my movie role. And then next thing you
Yeah.
know, like 2 months later, they're like so lean down and you're like, first of all, you're portraying it negatively where people then think that that is actually how you look like that. And second of all, I
Right.
mean, it's just, just all the drastic weight changes that they go through too. And then people think that that's healthy when it's not.
Crazy.
So yeah, I mean, I always say that's one of my bigger pet peeves. But now, what is one item that you always need to have in your fridge?
In my fridge. Oh, absolutely sugar-free Jello. I don't care if I'm dieting or if I'm like full on off season. I love me some sugar-free Jello.
What is your favorite flavor of Jello?
Cherry for sure.
Yeah, that is definitely a good
Clap.
one. I know that's well for Thanksgiving. I mean, we have that every single year, so yeah, I definitely enjoy that as well. But now, what is one thing that people who follow you on Instagram would be surprised to know about you if they met you in person?
Hmm. Guys know about me in person. Maybe the fact that I am kind of more, I guess I call myself an extroverted introvert. So I do share a lot of things on Instagram, but I also I need that recharge time. Like I need that me time, and I need that just alone time to recharge and regroup. So maybe that, because I feel like there's a perception that people who share a lot on Instagram and do a lot of collaboration there are just super outgoing all the time, but that I have kind of multiple sides to me. So definitely an extrovert introvert.
Yeah, I mean, same with me. I mean, everyone, especially with the podcasters too. I mean, when you're talking all the time, people think that you're just such a talkative person, but it's like, yeah, I mean, I get a lot of my talking done out of here. It
Yeah.
really takes my breath away, especially when I do multiple ones in a day. So yeah,
I'm
that's
sure.
definitely yeah. It gets to a point where I'm just like, okay, I'm finally done now. Now I can go and take a nap for God's. But yeah, I mean, I love doing what I'm doing, and again, find that thing that really you love doing. But yeah, I mean, I love asking the biggest misconceptions. But now, what is one thing that you would change about the sport of bodybuilding if you had the all-knowing power to do so?
I would say the subjectivity of like the bikini division for sure. It's so confusing because it seems like what they're looking for is always changing. And even from show to show, some of the other divisions, it's more defined in terms of the symmetry and what they're looking for. And then for bikini, there's just you don't really know until you show up that day. So I'd say, I know it's starting to evolve. They're starting to define a little bit more what that looks like. But I'd say just from an overall, having a little bit more of an understanding of what you're going for would be helpful.
I mean, I can completely agree with you on that. And everyone always talks about, like how we might need to make a whole nother division, in between, figure and bikini, just because
Oh.
they're so different because like the types can be so different. I mean, you can have judges that
Right.
want a little bit more muscular of a bikini camera, and then there are judges that they just want a soft one. And then, yeah, so I mean, you put it perfectly where, I mean, there's so many different things that you need to worry about. And, you could be training your butt off and put on a little bit more muscle. And then the judge that you have might not like it. And the next judge at the next show might like it. So, I mean, it's really hard
Right.
to sort of gauge that. I mean, I completely understand that. But now, what is the last TV show that you binge watched?
Oh, you. Um, it's kind of like that thriller
Mm-hmm.
feeling. It was awesome.
So I'm gonna be completely honest. I had a podcast that I recorded earlier today, and in between that podcast and this podcast, I watched the first episode of You because I kept hearing so many recommendations
Yeah,
where I finally got into it. So when I'm done recording this, I'm gonna go watch a few more before I start my editing tonight. So yeah, I'm definitely, it looked very good. So I'm excited
gonna
to
get
see
in.
what happens to it. Yeah, I see how interesting it gets. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it does look very, very good. But now, what is your
It's
favorite TV show of all time?
favorite of all time. I still love Dexter. I hate the way it ended, but that was my favorite TV show for sure. It's hard for me to find something where I get sucked in and I just can't stop watching it, and that was one of them for me. And I think that might have been the only thing that I watched like the first to the last episode like religiously.
Yeah, I mean, I'd never watched it myself. Is that the one with the serial killer?
Yeah.
Yeah, where he's,
That's
yeah, yeah.
a crazy
Yeah.
person, but it was just really good in the character development.
I was gonna say, you and Dexter's or something that you want to admit to us on this podcast?
I'm not
No,
like a
but
closet
yeah,
crazy person. I just really
yeah.
enjoy like those like psychological thrillers and those kinds of things.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do too. Like American Psycho and Psycho are some of my more favorite movies. I mean, yeah, it's really fascinating just to go into those depths and see how those people operate. Yeah, 100.
Yeah.
I mean, as a matter of fact, I even had a professor come on who was a director of that, and he used to work for the CIA, and he would like
Oh,
interview mass murderers, after they did what they did, and just we talked about that. So yeah, that was a cool conversation too, just seeing like
interesting.
how their minds differed. Yeah, it was really, really fascinating. But now, I mean, everyone always has one. What is your guilty pleasure movie?
Guilty pleasure movie. Hmm. Probably Zoolander. It's so ridiculous, but the original. The second
Yeah.
was really disappointing, as sequels often
Mhm.
are. But if I really just need a good pick me up and I want to laugh, it'd be Zoolander for sure.
I mean, yeah, whenever I see something that's really small, I see, is this a school for ants? Or and just yeah, how can the children learn to read if they can't even fit into the bill? I mean, that's one of my favorite lines of any movie of all time. I mean that's if I'm ever feeling down, yeah, I always watch that clip on YouTube, and then it always brings me up just because. But yeah,
Yeah,
the second one, just like
it's a
every
good
sequel, was definitely disappointing. For my guilty pleasure movie, okay, all my guy friends, close your ears. Princess Bride, my guilty pleasure movie. Never
one.
admit it in public. Love that movie. I mean, I can quote most of it, and when it comes on, I stop what I'm doing. So I'll give an example. In college, I was writing my thesis paper. It came on, dropped what I was doing, finished watching the
That's
movie.
me.
And if that isn't dedication, I don't know what is.
I love it.
Yeah,
Fully
but
support.
now, yeah, it's such a classic movie. But now, what is your favorite fashion trend of all time and least favorite fashion trend of all time?
Favorite fashion trend is
Mhm.
high waisted pants.
Yep.
May they never die because I don't know who decided low rise was a
Mhm.
good idea, but oh man. Yeah, so hopefully that doesn't go anywhere. Least favorite? Hmm. Probably things that aren't stretchy.
Mhm.
Going back to that, honestly. But anything that's like high rise and a little bit stretchy, like I'm all about it.
Yeah, I mean, I totally understand. For me, it's flannel, just because like when you're in the very cold temperatures, you gotta have something warm. So during winter, it's got to be
Yeah.
flannel. But I mean, my least favorite. I mean, my dad ruined this in the late '90s. I mean, just looking at old pictures, I just feel regret. But fanny packs. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
don't
They're
get me
making
wrong. Don't get me wrong. Women can pull off a fanny pack because I hear it all the time. Well, then the women go, "Oh, but I love fanny packs." It's like, well, you guys can pull it off, but guys with dad bods, I mean, don't rock a fanny pack. It's not gonna work. If there's one thing I can do from this entire podcast is just try to spread the awareness that fanny packs for men are trying to make a comeback, and we have to stop them before they slowly take over the entire fashion industry. So yeah, that is mine. But now for our last question of the questionnaire, if you could go back in time and talk to the 18-year-old version of yourself, what would be the best piece of advice you would give her?
Yeah, I would tell her to stop worrying what everyone else is thinking and do what's best for you and follow your heart. Um, I think it's too easy to get wrapped up into what everyone else wants you to be and wants you to do and wants you to become, and just stick to who you are.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And for me, like I was a huge people pleaser back then, so just getting over that and just realizing that not everyone's gonna give your vibe. I mean, I would recommend that 100 times. But now we have these two final questions before we wrap things up here. So you said that you're getting ready to prep together with your fiance, but when is your next show? Do you have a date in mind, or are you just currently just working out and just seeing when the next shows would be available?
yeah, so I'm hoping to target starting a prep and doing a show like early 2020. I know it sounds like
Mhm.
a long time away. There's just a lot going on, in terms of like getting married and all that this year. And then, I still want to take a little bit more time in my improvement season and see, what I can build from there. So that's kind of the timeline I've got in my head right now. I don't
At,
think people take enough time for improvement seasons either. A lot of bikini athletes are guilty of doing show after show after show after show.
Mhm.
So it's important to take that time.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you just wreck your body. And I mean, I've had so many people come on and tell stories about that as well. So I mean, I couldn't agree with you more on that. But now, lastly, is there anyone that you would like to give a shout out to before we wrap things up?
Shout out, sure. So I'd love to shout out my fiance, Blake Rockwood.
Hmm.
He's my constant inspiration. He's the person that keeps me going, keeps me grounded, for sure. And then, all of my friends back home in Buffalo, my good friend Bree Griebel here in Austin,
Hmm.
and everyone else out there who's killing it in the gym and going after their goals.
Now, I do have to ask, when you do get married, are you going to change your last name?
Yes. So it'll be Caitlin Rockwood.
Okay, good. Because
Yeah.
for everyone out there, George, it is not spelled like any other George that you would ever find. They came over from Germany. We talked about this before we recorded the podcast. So I was gonna say, yeah, that would make your life so much easier when you change it
Yeah.
to yeah, that
I
would make
hope
it so
so.
much. Hopefully,
I
yeah.
don't even say George anymore because
Mhm.
if I start they start with a G and start
Mhm.
writing it wrong, I just spell it.
Yeah.
I've learned that the hard way, but I have a very difficult name.
It's not spelled like anything George that I've ever heard of. So yeah, definitely changing that last. Let's be honest. I probably think that's one of the reasons why you're getting married in the first place is just so that you can
Yeah.
finally change your
I
last name. Yeah,
I just picked him based on
yeah,
his name.
yeah.
I mean,
Just
everything,
tell him. Yeah, you have a great name. Let's go the aisle. No,
and now
no,
I
but
can
all
call myself like Caitlin the Rock. So I mean,
absolutely. But I mean, yeah, all joking aside, honestly, we wish you nothing but the best. Thank you so much for coming on. I mean,
thank you.
I think you're going to do great. And everyone, go and give her a follow down below. I mean, just taking one look at some of her photos, you're going to want to get off the couch and stop eating all those Twinkies and, start adapting that more healthy and fit lifestyle. But again, you guys, Katlynne Joerg, we cannot thank you enough for coming on the podcast. Everyone, links down below. Go and give her a follow. 100%. And thank you so much again for coming on. This is Ryan Johnson, DD on the spot, signing out. Have a great day, everyone.